is this?
Well, at least I'm not dead. Might as well talk about SpongeBob. Unless you've been living under a rock for the past 25 years, you know who SpongeBob is. Created by Stephen Hillenburgh, the yellow absorbent fellow and all of his friends and enemies have been staples of children's entertainment since 1999 and have practically been the face of Nickelodeon ever since. From the show that started it all, to the films on the big screen, to holiday specials, toys, clothes, books, you name it, SpongeBob has cemented himself as a cartoon icon whether you like it or not. And to nobody's surprise, SpongeBob is no stranger to video games as well. There's over 100 games that feature the yellow square, but for the sake of whatever little sanity that I have left, I'm only going to be covering 25. This sounds like a lot, which it is, don't get me wrong, but I'm only going to be covering games that were released on consoles and PCs because I don't really want to cover the PC counterparts for console games already, and there's so many mobile games that I would have to use all of my roommates' hands to count them, and I don't think they're willing to do that for me. While the show first aired in 1999, the series didn't receive any official video games until the year 2000. When the hell did you get here?
Well, I heard you say my name, so I decided to see what's going on.
Don't you have, like, work or something?
Oh, yeah, I should probably go do that.
Anywho, while the show first aired in 1999, the series didn't receive any official video games until the year 2001, with SpongeBob SquarePants Legend of the Lost Spatula for Game Boy Color. Anyways, yeah, I found a chair. Go and sue me. This is the only game in the series that was made for Game Boy Color, and it was developed by Vicarious Visions and published by THQ. You're gonna be seeing this logo a lot, so if you're afraid of the big letters TH and Q, I recommend you click off the video. Oh my god! The game boots up with a chiptune rendition of the classic iconic theme song, and yep, I'm thinking, banger, I'm thinking banger. The game follows SpongeBob as he discovers an old statue of what looks to be a prehistoric SpongeBob on a modern-day grill top. Sure, man. SpongeBob then goes back to Mr. Krabs, only for him to send SpongeBob on the adventure of a lifetime in search of the key to the city. And quite honestly, I would kick him out too, because if my employee looked at me with that face, I think I would call the police. You're then thrown into Bikini Bottom, where the real game begins. This is a 2D platformer with the world's highest jump known to man. In this game, you're tasked with aimlessly roaming around the town in search for the aforementioned key to the city. You are given no instruction as to where to search or where to even begin. While roaming around the town, you can interact with the people of Bikini Bottom, and they'll give you hints as to where your goal is. But I'd rather not take advice from characters that look like they're Once you actually find the level you need to be in, you will quickly realize how awful this game's platforming is. Every jump is practically blind as you jump so high, and the camera is so zoomed in that the platform that you're aiming for goes out of frame, which makes easy platforming sections like level 1 irritatingly difficult. It doesn't help that the game is insanely short as well, with me beating it in only around half an hour. And honestly, I think it's best that we move on because there really isn't much left to talk about with this game to begin with. The townsfolk still managed to crack me up though. This is the only Game Boy adjacent game that I'm going to cover, so no Game Boy versions of console releases. And speaking of consoles, we're already at the consoles now. Oh god, Garfield, why did you have to do that to me? That was way too many games before the I bet this sound made at least one of you ejaculate. SpongeBob Super Sponge for PlayStation was released in late 2001 and was developed by Climax. The jokes really just write themselves. Would you be surprised if I told you that this is where the SpongeBob series peaked as a whole? Because I'm lying to you. This game is another 2D platformer that follows SpongeBob and the quest for something. I don't know, I got distracted during the intro. The game plays like a traditional side-scroller in which you run from point A to point B and avoid obstacles along the way, with the occasional checkpoint. Is that Stewie Griffin? Along your journey, you also pick up your trusty jellyfish net to collect jellyfish and use them as ammunition. As you traverse through the levels, you pick up gold spatulas along the way, and these act as your health bar, similar to how Sonic the Hedgehog uses rings. If you get hit, you lose all of your spatulas, and if you lose all your spatulas, you lose a life. The levels are pretty boring with sporadic enemy placement, and they're all relatively short as well. Each level has a new mechanic to adapt to, like how Level 2 in Chapter 1 plays in Sandy's Tree Dome, and how Chapter 2 plays with the Reef Blower. Wow guys, you get the reference? Because I sure didn't. Each chapter ends with a boss fight as well. Chapter 1 ends with the fight against the mother jellyfish, where you have to catch your jellyfish and throw them back at her a total of 10 times. Like I said before, Chapter 2 introduces the Reef Blower. You can use it to break down rock walls, and that's pretty much all I was able to do. The controls are really clunky once you get to this point, and I ended up getting stuck, game overed, and...
Where is everybody? SpongeBob! Squidward! That is my birthday. Has everybody forgotten?
I'm sure the game would probably pick up again after this stage, but for the life of me, I just could not beat it for some reason. Honestly, one of the only redeeming factors about this game is the character sprites. Not because they're good, but oh my god, they are hilarious at times. Look at what did they do to Sandy? what? And after this game came out, there weren't really any more SpongeBob games to come out for the next coming years. I mean, there was a literal drought where the water-based creatures needed to roam. Now guess how long it took between games to come out. 6 months? A whole year, maybe? 4 days! It took 4, it took 4. If you haven't noticed already, this is SpongeBob. This game was released in 2001 and was developed by Aw Games. The game starts off with you in SpongeBob's room, where he looks at you with his hard, dead, beady eyes, locked in on you with no sign of... Oh, no, never mind, he blinked, never mind. Upon entering the first level, a cutscene plays showing off the plot for the game, with the aliens just not being explained in the slightest. Plankton has constructed a robotic replica of Mr. Krabs to steal the Krabby Patty formula once again.
Can you please draw the elevator in the correct location?
After the cutscene, you're dropped into the game. This game is an isometric point-and-click adventure game where you must complete mini-games in a set time limit. Like in level 1, for example, where you control Robo-Crabs and collect ingredients for the Krabby Patty. This point-and-click style of gameplay is persistent across the whole game, not really ever changing up aside from the types of mini-games like the boating school checkpoint hunt and the jellyfish catching with Sandy. It's just a glorified minigame collection with a bunch of mediocre to awful cutscenes in between. Like, they could have at least added some variety to the minigames, but it's just the same old repetitive point-and-click adventure game that plagued the early 2000s on PCs. Now, despite how awful this intro actually looked, the game has some pretty good jokes, I'm not even gonna lie.
Howdy, little square dude. I've been waiting for my jellyfishing partner.
Whatever.
Hopefully the next game actually has some substance, because I'm really tired of these nothing burger games. Burger. Damn, I'm hungry. Dude, where is everyone? SpongeBob SquarePants Employee of the Month was released in 2002 and was developed by Aw Games once again. The game starts out with another horrific cutscene.
Don't you want to see my...
Moonwalk!
Mr. Krabs receives a letter containing 2 tickets to King Neptune's Paradise and gives them both to SpongeBob as a reward for being titled Employee of the Year. This is another point-and-click adventure game, but this time, instead of a minigame collection, it's a traditional adventure game. You can actually freely explore the town of Bikini Bottom to an extent and interact with the NPCs scattered around the place. The goal of the game is to essentially arrive at Neptune's Paradise with Patrick. In order to get directions to the paradise, you're required to complete a bunch of small quests that coincide with the story, like preparing a Krabby Patty for the customer to get directions to the bus stop, give a compliment to the jeweler shop owner to get a videotape, which then gets forgotten about just like me, head to the bargain mart where Mr. Krabs is...
Good grief, he's naked!
And wash off the employee's car to get some urchin chips for grandma, etc., etc. The whole game is filled with fetch quests like these that are used to progress the story. They all involve talking to a character, completing that quest, getting the item, and bringing it to another character to repeat the process until you get the bus tokens needed to get to Neptune's Paradise, and until your fingers start breaking from the amount of times you have to advance the dialogue. After hopping on the bus, Plankton is introduced in the story. He does nothing. The bus driver is the real villain in this story, however. Just like in real life. He takes a wrong turn due to the poor weather and drops the boys in rock bottom, in which they are now trapped due to... The fetch quests continue after SpongeBob uses a bidet for the first time. First, you talk to this man that looks very familiar and steal his can, then head to the weather station where SpongeBob just straight lies to your face.
Ooh, Operation Krabby Patty. That was my very first game.
Well, what the f are we then? Honestly, there isn't really much point talking about this game farther than this because the gameplay loop is exactly the same throughout the entire game, and the whole game is just under 2 hours long. In all honesty, the cutscenes are really the only highlight of the game for me because good lord, some of these faces, dude. Again, with the faces, man. Anyways, these games have not been the greatest so far. That's probably because SpongeBob hasn't really found his niche in the gaming world yet, if that makes sense. Hopefully THQ can actually do some good for the console games, though. I've heard they're pretty good at that. Why are we still here? They didn't mess it up this badly, did they? SpongeBob SquarePants Revenge of the Flying Dutchman was released in 2002 for the PS2 and GameCube and was developed by Big Sky Interactive. This game boots up with an image file for the title screen, and yet the main menu is fully playable? That's not even the first of the strange decisions this game decides to take, because not even a minute into the game, you're shown this cutscene.
What a silly dream! Mr. Krabs had to close the Krusty Krab! Like that'd ever happen.
I guess they never bothered improving the face animations in the jump from PC to console. The plot of this game is pretty straightforward. Gary digs up a buried treasure chest and brings it to SpongeBob, who is now illiterate, apparently.
There's something written on it. I think it says, Damjer, Donut Alpine, Orelsi. I wonder what that means.
They open up the crate and discover a bottle, which SpongeBob wipes down and summons the devious Flying Dutchman. He declares that SpongeBob must join his pirate crew as punishment for rummaging through his treasure. And SpongeBob, being the amazing pet owner that he is, completely rats out Gary as the discoverer of the chest.
Technically speaking, it was not me who found you. Gary's the one who dug you up.
The Dutchman then leaves to check up on the rest of his loot and leaves SpongeBob to say his goodbyes to Gary. And instead of doing what the obedient little submissive sponge is told, he instead adventures onward in search of a way to save Gary. This is a 3D platformer in which you run around and complete tasks in order to eventually defeat the Flying Dutchman. If you couldn't tell by watching the footage, this is pretty awful. The controls are janky and really floaty, which I guess makes sense considering they're underwater, but it's like too floaty. It doesn't make for good gameplay. Like I mentioned before, along your journey, you'll be completing a bunch of quests for the residents of Bikini Bottom. These quests include fixing Patrick's TV, which takes literally 5 seconds.
Whoa! My TV is fixed!
Delivering orders to the customers of the Krusty Krab in downtown Bikini Bottom, and finding the Flying Dutchman's other treasures scattered around the map. Along the way, the Flying Dutchman kidnaps Gary, and now your goal is to travel to the Dutchman's ship and rescue Gary for real this time. You travel to a bunch of other different locations from the series to accomplish this goal, like Goo Lagoon, downtown Bikini Bottom, which you wouldn't even need to go there if... Okay, does any of what I'm about to say make sense to you? So one of the main plot points in this game is that Mr. Krabs decides to shut down the Krusty Krab until business starts booming again. But you can't have business boom if you don't have a restaurant. What's the point of shutting down the place that you make the food so more people will buy the food? I know you're doing deliveries, but that kind of defeats the whole purpose of having a physical restaurant. Like, you would think that the money-making machine, like Krabs himself, would at least have some decent idea of how the economy works. It doesn't really seem like the smartest business decision to me, Crab. Tangent aside, this game is not good in the slightest. I gave the game an honest shot, but I just couldn't be asked to play all of it. I'm sincerely sorry to any genuine fans that wanted to see me complete the full game. I don't know how to really apologize for all this. You know, I can't really put it in the words. Yeah, the developers decided to leave a debug level select code in the pause menu that lets you choose any level and go there immediately. And hey, look at that, we're at the final boss. The final boss is straightforward and incredibly easy, even for a game intended for children like this game was. You run around in circles until the Flying Dutchman spawns in bombs, and then you just hit him 3 times with said bombs. So we're already 4 games in.
Everybody in the crowd, give a big round of applause to this genius right here.
This guy's an idiot! And none of them have been pretty good. That's not a good sign. And the higher-ups at Nickelodeon must have noticed this too, because we didn't get another SpongeBob game for a full year. Yo, look! Battle for Bikini Bottom, You all saw this coming. This is the second game released primarily on home consoles and was pushed out on the GameCube, PS2, and the original Xbox. Released in 2003, this game is widely regarded as the debut of the golden era for the SpongeBob series, with the majority of that credit going to Heavy Iron Studios, who are widely regarded for making the best games in this series, and this game is no exception to that. The game starts out with Plankton creating an army of robots to help assist him in taking over Bikini Bottom, but they end up turning on him, spreading chaos into the town. It's then up to SpongeBob as usual to save the day, because nobody in this town is capable of doing anything with others in mind. One thing I'd like to point out is how the cutscenes, while not looking the best, are leagues better than the previous 3 games, mainly because the mouths don't move like paper shredders anymore. This is another 3D platformer, but unlike the previous game, the controls are actually really tight. Moving and jumping around are really fun, and the platforming is actually challenging at times. The camera controls like shit, but the platforming definitely makes up for that. Each location has around 8 golden spatulas hidden around the platforming challenges and puzzles. But there's other things to grab as well, like shiny objects that are used to open barricades across levels, and Patrick's old stinky old smelly stupid rinky dinky old soccerinos, which can be exchanged for more spatulas. The many locations you explore during your adventure are all pretty well executed design wise and have all very fun platforming challenges. Along your journey, you'll meet a bunch of familiar characters as well, like Squidward, Mrs. Puff, Mermaid Man, who's strangely obsessed with feet.
Huh? Oh, no. I think it had something to do with massaging my feet.
Well, if massaging your feet will save Patrick, then massage I must.
Help! They're making me hit myself!
Massaging your feet isn't working. I think I'd better try a more direct approach.
By clipping my toenails?
There's a good amount of boss fights too, with some iconic characters like the King Jellyfish and the Flying Dutchman, which I forgot to beat in my playthrough, as well as newcomers like the robotic versions of Sandy, Patrick, and SpongeBob. The boss fights are fine, to be honest. They aren't too difficult and they're relatively fun, but they're definitely a lower point in the game for me personally. An upside of these bosses, however, particularly from the robot variant, is that upon defeating them, you gain access to new power-ups like the Bubble Bowl and the Cruise Bubble, which are used to complete even more puzzles in newly unlocked levels, or levels you had already explored before, similar to how Mario 64 has some stars locked behind power-ups like the Wing Cap and Metal Cap. You also have 2 powers out the gate as well, those being the Head Bash and your Bubble Wand. All of these play a key role in assisting you in defeating the many robots scattered around the town.
Now, I want you to look behind me for a second. Yeah, I can just do that now, I guess. Now, you may be wondering, that's not the Bob. Where art thou, the Bob? Fret not, young one, but you can play as more than one character in this game. I'd like to introduce you to my friends Pink SpongeBob and Republican Furry SpongeBob. I don't make the rules, sorry kid.
At certain points in the game, you can use the bus stops placed around the levels to switch to either Patrick or Sandy. They both have their own attacks and mechanics that offer a good variety compared to just La Esponga de Ponga. You can freely explore the level as well, as long as you stay within the boundaries set by your good old friend Hans here, who will grab you and put you back on solid ground if you end up going too far out of bounds. Too far out of bounds. Too far out of bounds.
Yeah, to no one's surprise, this game is really buggy. I mean, hell, it's 6 hours long, but speedrunners like Shift have been able to take the game down to 40 minutes at the time of writing this. There's a lot more I could cover, but I'm gonna save that for later. Most of you already know why, but if you don't, stick around, because it's gonna get interesting. This was honestly the best game by far, without a doubt. And I'm hoping that the next few games can bring that same quality that this game had. Is that David Hasselhoff?
I own a physical copy of the game, I'm just lazy. The SpongeBob movie tie-in game, also made by Heavy Iron. This was released in 2004, almost exactly a year after the previous game for the same platforms as before, with an extra download-only PS3 version as well.
If you couldn't tell at this point, the game is based on the 2004 theatrical film by the same name, and it has pretty much the exact same plot.
Wow, I could not have been more wrong. I assumed that the SpongeBob SquarePants movie game would be based off that hit film, Saving Private Ryan.
What the fuck?
Considering that this game came out less than a year after Bikini Bottom, it's not surprising that the developers would reuse the same engine that the last game used. This means that the controls and general feel for the game are nearly identical, though there are new additions, like how Patrick now uses Sandy's lasso ability from the previous game to swing across ice blocks, or how Patrick can cartwheel to move faster and bash into enemies. The game's mechanics haven't changed much from Battle for Bikini Bottom either. You can switch characters in the porta potty like how you would with the bus stops, and instead of collecting golden spatulas, you collect Goofy Goober tokens. You also gain access to new game modes, like driving around the paddy wagon around Bikini Bottom and other areas, That's really about it.
There's a bunch that I missed, but I honestly couldn't be bothered to finish the game, considering I've already seen the movie more times than I can count on both of my hands. Like, if you know the movie, you know what's gonna happen, and
Unlike the previous game, you can use the Goofy Goober tokens you collect along the way to unlock new power-ups thanks to Mindy here. These power-ups can also be used to upgrade said power-ups in a separate menu, which will make them stronger and more efficient. And for anyone not in the know, Mindy is King Neptune's daughter and is the love interest to Patrick in the film.
yeah, go ahead and take a guess on how old she is for me. Go ahead, guess.
I guess you could say Patrick puts the P in P. Diddy.
Who are you? There's also boss fights as well, but you kind of have to expect that at this point. I know I'm skipping over a lot, but if you know the movie, you know the game, so I think I'll move on for now.
This transition will make sense in a sec. There's just something I have to announce first. This video is sponsored by me. I have a Patreon. Okay, come on. I don't make money from these videos yet, and they also take a really long time to make, so supporting on Patreon is a really good way to show that you're enjoying the content. With money! If you do decide to support, I'll be showing off early drafts of videos, as well as just letting you guys view the videos early, so you can get in your "I was here before everyone else" comments or whatever the hell you want to do. It's up to you. And hey, it's not even required. Just like and subscribe and it'll do the same. It's just you can give me money. But for real though, the Patreon link is in the description. If you want to show your support, go ahead. You don't have to if you don't want to, but it's greatly appreciated.
I also have a Discord server, link in description. Mwah, mwah, goodbye.
If this transition doesn't make sense by now, I don't know what to tell you, man.
SpongeBob Lights Camera Pants was released in 2005 for the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox once again, but developed by THQ's Australian studio this time around. The plot of the game follows the producer for the ever-popular Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy TV show, working through casting the next actors for the big special episode. This is just a minigame collection, unfortunately. However, the minigames are actually pretty fun. The themed locations are all pretty charming, and not to mention that the cutscenes are beautifully animated for a licensed game. The minigames range from several types of Mario Party-esque games that range from solo games against the computers to team minigames that contribute the same amount of points to each player. Speaking of points, you play a set of 3 minigames, and whoever gets the most points out of the set wins the specific role that the set was themed around, like the waiter, the police officer, the musician, etc. Oddly enough, whenever I played, I was only actually beat by the AI on 2 occasions. Patrick for the waiter, and Squidward for the conductor, which, if you know his character and his musical track record, this is indeed not true. Once acquiring the last role, the supervillain is chosen, that being lil old Bobbito Bobbertson here. Now let's do a bit of editing magic here. Notice that I have roughly 40 minutes of footage left here. There isn't any gameplay here, so you would assume that I just left the recording running for 40 minutes or something, right? The last 40 minutes of the game is the same set of cutscenes that were shown to you during the game, but in a completely different order, so I guess that's a completely necessary addition to this fine video game.
Now, I'm assuming you can actually skip this cutscene when you're playing, but I didn't. Here's the full 40-minute uncut cutscene.
The new adventures of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy.
You get the point. Other than the 40-minute slog of rehashing the same cutscenes over and over at the very end, this game is actually very good. This game is a pretty good time waster, and I feel like that's the best compliment you can give to any kind of like minigame collection, because they really only go downhill past this point. Not specifically for the SpongeBob series, but just for this genre of a game as a whole. Or as a whole, not has a whole. Now, we aren't really out of the 5th generation of games just yet, but let's go ahead and take a quick detour with the Nintendo DS.
SpongeBob SquarePants The Yellow Avenger was released in 2005 for the Nintendo DS and PlayStation Portable, but I'll be covering the DS version, solely based on the title screen, because SpongeBob stanced up while his soulless dead eyes follow the text on screen until he stares deep into the back of my skull really enticed me. The plot of this game is relatively simple. Barnacle Boy is kidnapped by the Dirty Bubble, and it's up to SpongeBob and Mermaid Man to save him.
I guess you could say he puts the M in molester.
Where do you keep coming from? Hopefully the game itself isn't too bad.
Now,
Maybe I should have chose the PSP version.
This is a 2D platformer that has a very restrictive playstyle. You can only move in 2 directions and are bound to a set path regardless of where you go. This wouldn't really be that bad if it weren't for the fact that the game constantly changes camera perspective with each turn, and it's honestly kind of disorienting. I want to frolic! I want to feel free! You have a set of power-ups to use to, I don't know, actually. You use the touchscreen to draw shapes in order to do a specific action on these power pads. But the actual drawing detection is absolute. If you get this joke, you a real one. This game reeks. I couldn't even bring myself to play more than 15 minutes of this slop. In every video I've made, there's always somehow one game that just stands out more than the rest for being an actual waste of code and resources, and this one is no exception. I definitely wish that I played the PSP version now. Maybe I should check out what's different, actually.
Do you guys want to see the jellyfish milking minigame? No, I'm not joking either.
SpongeBob SquarePants: The Creature from the Krusty Krab was released in 2006 for the PS2, GameCube, and Wii, and was developed by Blitz Games. This game takes place entirely inside the dreams of SpongeBob, Patrick, and Plankton. Thank God we aren't in Mr. Krabs' dreams, because we all know what goes on in there. Each dream plays entirely differently from one another, like how Plankton's dream is a 2D platformer, Patrick's dream is a 3D beat-em-up, and SpongeBob's is... Oh my god, I think I love him. One notable thing about this game is the very distinctly different art styles. SpongeBob's levels are in a more gritty, steampunk-inspired art style. Patrick's levels are in a more Marvel or DC superhero comic style with cell shading. And Plankton stages are in the traditional 3D SpongeBob art style. This concept is honestly really cool.
Yeah, really cute, dude. Yeah. Respect my authority.
This concept is honestly really cool. Nightmare fuel aside. SpongeBob's dream follows the Bobulous Sponge Fellow in his journey to recover his driver's license, which just magically hops away. You have to platform throughout the steampunk arena of sorts to get the Mrs. Puff, who gives you your license back, and then Freak Bob can race again. The race is unfortunately pretty long, which wouldn't be an issue if it weren't for the fact that half of the track is just a straightaway, and each lap takes around a minute to complete. Patrick's story revolves around Starfish Man, the self-proclaimed vigilante hero of the town, and his quest in defeating the dreaded Patrick. You must travel around the city and beat the ever-living shit out of the dreaded Patrick's evil goons. This happens a lot. There are also a ton of dreaded Patrick posters that need to be torn down around the map, which, oh my god, Displayed, sponsor me please, I need this on my wall. You end up chasing the dreaded Patrick to his hidden but also not so hidden hideout, yada yada, fight the baddies, big old DP gets away, but then the mayor slides into frame, Plankton's dream, Big Burger, auto runner platform, Big Burger. Honestly, Plankton's levels weren't that bad, they just weren't really notable. The stories for each character continue onward until the very end, where all 3 dreams intertwine somehow, which is honestly a pretty cool way of ending it off.
I skipped over a ton, but this game is honestly pretty good. Especially considering that this was the first game released for the Nintendo Wii, which does unfortunately mean that there's going to be a lot of forced motion controls, but hey, you can't really complain much when you're playing on the PS2. And speaking of motion controls, that really reminds me of Atlantis for some reason. If I had my Wii remote in here, I would show you, but put the clip on screen.
Dude, recording this SpongeBob video is so funny, because the way I have my setup for the recording, I have to go outside and around the side of our house to the side door that's connected to my room for some reason, all the way around outside. And only then, once I'm in here, I can actually get the recording. SpongeBob Atlantis SquarePants was released in 2007 for the PS2 and Wii and was developed by Blitz Games once again. Unfortunately, compared to their previous work, this game is pretty mediocre. It's a mix between a tank shooter, a puzzle game, and a pretty boring minigame collection. This game was based entirely off the episode of the same name, so if you're not familiar with that episode, long story short, SpongeBob and the crew end up at the lost city of Atlantis in search of the world's oldest bubble, which they manage to pop and get exiled from the lost city, along with any other potential visitors.
Yeah, in other words, SpongeBob and Patrick are terrorists.
Upon first opening the game, I gotta say, man, the title screen itself isn't too good, but the music? Oh my god, this is probably the best song in the series so far.
Cower before me, fools!
How did SpongeBob's trip to Atlantis end this way?
Me.
Who can stop Plankton's rampage of destruction?
Me.
Do you want to drive a really cool tank?
After the cutscene, we're put into the first. Hey, hi, SpongeBob. Hey, man, how you doing, SpongeBob?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Atlantis SquarePantis. We start things off, as all the best stories do, with an ice cream tank rampage. Guide Plankton in this tank that he, borrowed through Atlantis, starting in the armory and then escaping into the gardens. You'll need to steer the tank and fire the ice cream cannon to splat the Atlantean defenses.
Yeah, he yaps like this before every level. Anyways, the first level has you drive Plankton's tank through the armory of Atlantis pretty much. The tank honestly controls pretty well, and it's fun to shoot and blow everything up in your surroundings. It is important to note, however, I played this on the PS2, so I'm assuming that Wii motion controls would have a big effect as to how well this would work. Dodging attacks from opposing tanks is fun, and the small puzzles you're required to complete are cool as well. Level 2 has you control both SpongeBob and Patrick in a 2-player puzzle game. This was surprisingly good. And I honestly wish the whole game was like this. You traverse through multiple sets of puzzles that revolve around utilizing the specific character's movesets, like SpongeBob being able to open up the gates with his spatula, and Patrick just being able to launch SpongeBob over cliffs. At the end of this section, you stumble upon the second half of the Atlantean token coin jewel thingamababimbo. The next level takes place in the museum, where your job is to just be a nuisance to everybody that you see.
You have been warned. No flash photos. Read my fish lips! Turn off the flash!
I had no friends in high school.
The fourth level is just a rhythm game that's pretty terrible. It's not fun. The only redeeming factor of this minigame is that the faces some of these characters make are genuinely funny. Like Sandy and Krabs, for example. Especially Krabs. Level 5 has you driving the magic school bus after listening to one Metallica song, hitting checkpoints and collecting lost toolboxes, lunchboxes. I honestly don't remember, nor do I care, because the next level has you walking and then everyone dies. The end.
Who wants to talk about another DS game?
This will make sense in a second, hear me out. Drawn to Life is a 2D platformer adventure game, released exclusively on the DS, mainly because of the touchscreen utilization. The whole premise of this game is that you draw everything to life. You draw to life. You draw the character, you draw the weapon, you draw the enemies, you draw the platforms, etc.
And this game is honestly, like, really good for the time. Like, the concept of drawing things into life, as painstakingly obvious as that is for the title of the game, it's a very good concept, and it's honestly very slept on. Now, imagine if you had the same parent company remake the game, but add a bunch of SpongeBob assets to it.
Yeah, this isn't a mod or a fan game. This is an official SpongeBob version of Drawn to Life, developed by the original creators, THQ. Released in 2008, this game follows our boys Dingle, Blorb, and Paprika on a hand-drawn journey to stop the classic SpongeBob villain, Doodle Friggin' Bob, in his manic act. At the beginning of the game, 2 pencils fall into the ocean, and Patricia, being the rather incompetent fellow he is, openly admits that he's not supposed to draw Doodle Bob, and then draws him anyways, and then freaks out and runs away. The boys then decide to draw their hero to save the day, which you, the player, get to create and draw. This is a super cool idea, because you can draw literally anything as your hero. I made Gengar, because if you haven't noticed, that's me. Along your journey, you run around completing platforming challenges as well as defeating enemies drawn by Doodle Booble. And when presented the opportunity, draw something of your own, like this checkpoint here. I made it a penis. And at the very end of the level, you reach a victory display, which you also get to draw. Smith & Wesson. After beating a few levels, you get to create a house for your hero as well.
And let me tell you, the insurmountable amount of effort I put into this drawing will not go unnoticed. The museums will cower in fear when they see the intellectual level that I had to put into this artistry, this magnificence, this masterpiece!
I'm in my Home Depot. This is the whole premise of the game to an extent. You come across an empty shape, you draw some stupid shit, you complete the level, yada yada, oh look, Doodleboard. Each world ends with a boss fight against a drawn creature. Oh hey, Doodlebob has something to say. This fight is honestly pretty cool. You have to jump on the drawn monster repeatedly, then scribble on the bottom screen to slowly erase the boss from existence. Over the course of the game, you will have to erase a lot of enemies in random black ink sludge across the game, so seeing this come back for a boss fight is honestly pretty cool. Overall, this game is definitely a highlight for the series, especially for being a licensed DS game, because those are notoriously bad at times.
I have another one.
Oh boy, here it comes. Oh, this is my favorite part of the game. The legal. Oh yeah, the legal part.
With an introduction like that, there's no way this game will be bad, right? SpongeBob vs. the Big One Beach Party Cook-Off was released exclusively on the DS in 2009 and was developed by Fizz Factor.
Fizz Factor? More like Jizz Factor.
Anyways, there's no sugarcoating this, unfortunately. This game is just the shameless Cooking Mama ripoff, which, if you don't know, is a DS game where you cook with
Yo, mama!
In this SpongeBob ripoff version, the gameplay is exactly the same as what you would expect for a DS cooking game. The game utilizes the touchscreen to cook, and when I say cook, I mean cook, no Walter White. You cook a specific amount of meals per day, so depending on the amount of meals needing to be prepared, the levels can last ages. It doesn't help that the minigames revolving around the meal cooking aren't that great either. I'm sure that there's more to this game later on, but the gameplay wasn't very interesting enough to me to continue, even after sitting through it for over an hour.
The only redeeming factor about this game that I can think of is that it inspired me to make my very first meme. This isn't a joke. This was back in 2020. I was 15. I'm starting to run out of ways to transition these games, so waiter, one more DS game, please, my good man.
So you may be thinking, huh? Another handheld game? But I thought SpongeBob SquarePants Truth or Square, released in 2009, was next. You would be correct, but I question why you know that. Remember how I skipped out on the PSP version of the Yellow Avenger in favor of the DS version? Well, that's not happening this time. I'm giving the PSP a fair shot in this video if it's the last thing I ever do. Now, you may also be thinking, Sowre, why the hell would you play the PSP version and not one of the better versions like the Wii or Xbox 360 version, made by Heavy Iron Studios once again? For one, I don't own an Xbox, and two, I don't like you. The plot of this game gets to the point pretty quickly. SpongeBob is hosting the 11th anniversary party of the Krusty Krab, and Mr. Krabs has entrusted Spobdoogle to hold on to the secret Krabby Patty formula. SpongeBob, being the idiot that he is, misplaces it.
You ever wonder what SpongeBob uses all those holes for?
The gang attempts to help SpongeBob by making him go to his happy place and retrace his steps, which is where the actual gameplay begins. This is a 3D platformer that plays very similarly to the likes of Battle for Bikini Bottom. I don't want to make that comparison off rip, but when the first song that I hear in the first level is ripped directly from Battle for Bikini Bottom, I'm gonna make that comparison. You run around super slowly, jumping from platform to platform, beating up enemies with your spatula attacks, or you as a spatula? Okay then. All of this to achieve the goal of remembering where you put the formula on you, so how does this even correlate? Well, at the end of every level, you collect happiness objects to help jog SpongeBob's memory. I don't really see how that would work, but sure, man. Once you beat a level, you can find the happiness object inside the house, and if you interact with it, you receive 10 coins. Every single time you interact with it, you get 10 coins. The level follows the same gameplay loop of sorts. You run and jump to the end of the levels, collect the happiness objects, then move on to the next level with occasional boss fights. It's a very, very dry platformer, which doesn't even make sense considering they're underwater, though I am not opposed to giving the Wii version a shot in the future.
More handheld?
SpongeBob's Boating Bash for the Nintendo DS and also the Wii, but I completely forgot there was a Wii version until writing the script, was released in 2010 and was developed by Firebrand Games. This is a driving game, but not necessarily a racing game. Sure, there are races, but there's a lot more demolition derby elements to this as well. The plot involves SpongeBob attending Mrs. Puff's boating school and SpongeBob still attempting to get his driver's license after 25 years.
So did I pass this time, Mrs. Puff?
After yet another crash, the Sponge is approached by a sketchy-looking shark fella. His name is Seymour Scales, and his claim to fame is that he can get anyone a driver's license. This is where the new mechanics for the game are introduced.
You control the steering and the speed of your vehicle with the touchscreen, which, in all fairness, isn't that bad, but it's a little jarring to get used to at first.
Especially in the destruction levels. You have to drive into them at very specific angles in order to not bring yourself to a screeching halt and eventually blow yourself up. Speaking of destruction levels, I haven't even explained the level system yet. Each level is separated by Seymour's DRIVE program, which stands for Driveless, Recklessness, Impairment, Velocity, and Escape.
Alright, so according to his guidelines that I found online, you need to, in order to get your license, cause mass property damage, be criminally negligent, drive drunk at high speeds, and run from the police. Yeah, that sounds good to me, man. Let's go.
Let's drive! Each level gives you a rank depending on your performance in the stage, and the last stage of each group of levels is a class exam that tests your ability in each section. And I'm not gonna lie, this game has good ideas. I just don't feel they were implemented the best. And not to mention, again, that the mechanics are very buggy. If I knew the Wii version existed before writing the script, I would have played that. I've heard it's completely different.
I have another.
SpongeBob SquigglePants was released in 2011 for the Wii and 3DS and was developed by Wafer Technologies. I'm starting to run out of excuses to cover the DS handheld versions over the console versions at this point, but this time, I actually have a good excuse. The sole single reason that I'm not covering the Wii version for this is because it requires a very specific accessory to ever work. That being the U-Draw pad, created by, you'll never guess, THQ.
I'm starting to notice now that THQ really likes to just shove SpongeBob into whatever genre they can. I mean, every single game in this series so far has been published by THQ in some shape or form. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it is pretty interesting considering how many unique games SpongeBob has been in. And yeah, all things considered, it's not surprising at all why the Bob Man is being forced to do all of these things.
That being said, this is a WarioWare clone, and it's honestly pretty fun. I like this one. The Wii version uses the aforementioned U-Draw tablet, which is used to U-Draw. It's in the name. The 3DS version, however, uses the touchscreen for the exact same purpose, and as far as I'm aware, is the exact same as the console counterpart. So I feel like this is a good reason to avoid coughing up some bucks for a tablet I'm only ever going to use for one game. Okay, 2 games, leave me alone. Every stage is a compilation of timed micro games that all match different themes. These games are all completed with the touchscreen via spinning, drawing, tapping, licking, chewing, grilling, sauteing, seasoning, chopping, plating, serving, flushing, brushing, gushing, brushing. I mean, the varying themes for these levels are honestly pretty cool and creative at times. Like the first stage being hand-drawn, the second stage being horror-themed, and the third stage being themed on disco. All of these themes are honestly pretty creative, and they provide a lot of variety to the microgames. Patchy the Pirate also makes his first game appearance, as far as I'm aware, so that's always welcome. I wonder what will happen if I... What? How do I make him up? Do I press A? No. No, I don't. Do I? E? Touchscreen? What if I shake the car? Oh my god, he's waking up. He's waking up. This is honestly a good time, looking past the awful pixel-themed level. My only real complaint is that the game ends rather abruptly. You finish the second disco-themed stage, and then Patchy just closes the curtains, and then the credits roll? Sure, I guess. Upon completing the game, though, you unlock a drawing book that you can freely draw in, so you know I took full advantage of that.
Finally, I'm done with the handheld games. I mean, this console generation of SpongeBob has been ever dominant. I'm kind of missing the PC games now at this point. We need to bring back that old, clunky PC garbage from SpongeBob.
SpongeBob Tooncast Studio was developed by Smith Micro Software and was released in 2011.
If you're familiar with older Nickelodeon PC software, the name Nickelodeon 3D Movie Maker may ring a bell. It was used to make a lot of really popular memes back in the day, and I still see people using it every now and then.
Tooncast works in a similar fashion. You can place down a bunch of pre-rendered animated frames of the SpongeBob characters and have them move around and say a bunch of pre-recorded dialogue. You could have your video change backdrops and even add music on top of it from the show and movies. There was even functionality to send it videos that you make to people via social media like Twitter, Facebook, and Wizard Press. I really wish I could have gotten this to work on my computer, but unfortunately it's inoperable on anything higher than Windows 7. I would have installed a virtual machine, but I can't be bothered, which is a shame because I really wanted to make some of the most incomprehensible garbage imaginable. But I did find and watch the official guides for this application.
Just select where you'd like to share it. The rest is easy.
Yahoo!
Try it yourself, and don't be afraid to experiment. And remember to check the user guide in the help menu for detailed instructions. Happy Tooncasting!
I don't need help. Put it on Yahoo.
It's definitely a cool piece of abandonware, but I'm actually really sad that I couldn't get it to work because it looks like it would have been a lot of fun to just mess around in. But it's not even the weirdest one that I'm covering today. Like, this next game is probably the weirdest and most out there game that I've covered in any series so far. Like, I don't even know how to transition to it. It's so weird. Like, yeah, here we are. Like, huh?
SpongeBob and the Clash of Triton was released in 2011 as well, developed by Chewy Software. I like my software tender, thank you. The game follows the plot of the episode of the same name, where King Neptune's son attempts to take over Bikini Bottom after being freed by the Spog and the Pog. I don't really remember the part of the episode where SpongeBob and Patrick go full King Kong mode and punch down every building in town, but I guess, yeah, we were doing that, I guess. This game is a side-scrolling beat-em-up game. You have to take down every building on screen as well as defeat all the little Krabby Patty guys. Doing so will restore that area of the town. If you couldn't tell by now, but this game has a very distinct art style. It's very crude, and the proportions are all pretty skewed, especially on Patrick.
Bro's built like a jelly bean, man.
After each level, the two characters gain access to upgrade points of sorts, which can be used to upgrade their jump power, speed, health points, and the trident. This is pretty much the whole game. I mean, sure, there are different enemy variants, but there aren't really any major gameplay changes or anything notable that I noticed.
I have another.
Alright, I have a reason for covering this one and not the other version. A lot of you may know this game, SpongeBob Surf and Skate Road Trip, as the really shitty Xbox 360 Kinect game released in 2011 that barely even worked. I would have covered that version if it weren't for the fact that A, I don't own an Xbox 360 like mentioned before, and B, this game is honestly terrible. There's no other ways to describe it. You play as SpongeBob who surfboards and Tony Hawk the skateboarder. You use the stylus on the touchscreen to influence movement and whenever tricks are performed, as well as building up speed to achieve these tricks. By landing more tricks, your score gets larger and larger, and there's a required minimum score to beat each level. At its core, the idea for the game isn't bad. However, it's rather clunky and the touchscreen is a little finicky. The skateboard segments are okay at best. The grind mechanic took me ages to figure out, and it's just slow. One positive thing I do have to say, though, about the game is that it looks very good visually. I love the sprites of Patrick skateboarding in particular. They're really bouncy and do add charm to an otherwise nothing burger game.
Now we're finally done with the handheld games. I promise. Seriously this time. This generation of SpongeBob games have been really weird and honestly pretty mediocre, but hopefully with the 6th generation consoles being introduced, the quality of the games will only go up.
SpongeBob SquarePants Plankton's Robotic Revenge was released in 2013 for every single major console at the time. I'm not even joking. This joint was released on everything. This was developed by Behavior Interactive and is the first game on consoles to not be published by THQ. Instead being published by Activision of all people.
This is unfortunately entirely due to THQ shutting down due to bankruptcy on January 23rd, 2013. And due to this, Activision took over for the SpongeBob series, and as you can see from their astounding list of games, this is, oh god, oh no, that's not a good sign.
The game is a 3D beat-em-up platformer of sorts, where you travel from point A to point B, destroy a bunch of robots, destroy batteries to open up barriers, and enter whirlpools to finish the level. Instead of traditional combat, however, they use guns.
Don't worry, SpongeBob, I'll save you!
The gameplay loop is extremely simple and repetitive, yet I strangely enjoyed this one. The gizmos, or weapons you use along your journey, all have upgrades that you can unlock, using the little bits of gears and screws you collect from the robots you destroy, and chests that you can open up as well. You can also use this currency of sorts to unlock new and stronger weapons, but you can realistically beat the game with the starter weapon like I almost did.
Embarrassingly enough, I never figured out how to switch weapons until like the last 2 levels of the game, so I was rocking the Picky Blicky for the whole damn game.
The plot of the game is your typical Plankton steals the formula, go and get it back type of story, but this time he steals the whole safe instead. Wow, you're really innovating here, Plankton. Good job. Along the way, you encounter him in boss battles, as well as his 2 cousins, Clem and Rainchild, who actually appeared in the episodes of the show a couple times. These boss fights are fine, I guess. They're piss easy, but that's to be expected from a game of this caliber. You need the mental motor skills of a toddler to beat the boss without getting hit. Ignore that. Ignore that one too. Ignore that. Clem and Rainchild are holding the keys to the safe that are required to collect in order to continue, and defeating Plankton at the end rewards you with the safe and the end credits.
Now, I have a theory to propose that I haven't really heard anybody else talk about before. Rainchild. You see, in the show, Rainchild is a teal plankton with beady black eyes. But in the game, his eyes are red. This isn't Rainchild. This is a skinwalker of sorts. A plank walker.
Overall, this game is actually not that bad. It's a good game to just turn your brain off to for a few hours. And considering that I grew up with games like Phineas and Ferb Across the Second Dimension DS and most of the Skylanders games that have very similar gameplay, it made me weirdly nostalgic for it, even though I never had a PS3 as a kid.
I lied.
I know I said I was done with the handheld games, but I promise this is the last one. This is SpongeBob Hero Pants, which released in 2015, right around the time that the theatrical film Sponge Out of Water was released. This game was released on the Xbox 360, PS Vita, and the 3DS. And fun fact about Sponge Out of Water, I actually went to school with the kid that kicks down the sandcastle in that movie. I was friends with him in elementary school. This game released on the Xbox 360, PS Vita, and the 3DS.
I don't own the other 2 thingamabobs, I only own the 3DS.
You called?
No, I didn't call you Bob. Wrong Bob. Alright, now that that's... What the whoa!
This is what peak gaming looks like, you just don't know it yet. The game starts out with a pre-rendered cutscene that attempts to make sense of the story, but instead misses the entire point. In the movie, once the aquatic game is out of the water and on the land, they use a page from the magic book that the main villain used to acquire the secret formula and write themselves superpowers. But in the game, Bubbles the magic dolphin gives them the powers. But how do they know Bubbles? How do they know Bubbles? When was this introduced? They managed to get the entire plot of the film wrong. They even managed to screw up the continuity. Like this, they act like this is their first time seeing the superpowers. Were they like Men in Black memory wiped or something? Weird story flaws aside. Oh God. Okay. Ooh. Hello there. This is another 3D beat-em-up platformer of sorts, but it's extremely bare bones. Genuinely, the whole gameplay loop is the same as the last game. Beat enemies, collect the items scattered around the level, and beat the level. Like, I genuinely can't explain this any better. It doesn't help that the game is glitchy as all hell. The main focus of this game, aside from the platforming, is the combat, which is where the superpowers come in. By touching the touchscreen, you can transform into your super form, which lasts for a short amount of time before you turn back into your normal form and you have to recharge it again. It's honestly not too bad of a mechanic. It's just super weird because you move significantly faster while you're in your super form, which makes your regular form just super slow in comparison. I assumed this would just be a SpongeBob thing at first, but nope, every character gets this stupid speed boost in super form. Speaking of characters, every major character from the film is playable, alongside each of their super forms from the movie as well, for better or for worse. This is what the difference between 5'11 and 6 foot feels like. If I'm being completely honest, the game feels like they published a development build instead of the final product. The amount of glitches, graphical oddities, and the overall cheat quality of the game screams rushed development, and it honestly makes me wonder if this was the full idea for the game.
Due to the very poor reception of this game and the fact that Activision lost the rights to SpongeBob after this, we didn't see any games from SpongeBob, really, besides like the on and off Flash games and mobile games from Nickelodeon. It seemed like the console series for SpongeBob is in a permanent deadlock, unless somebody steps into the scene.
Though, in the darkest era of the series, something big was happening in the shadows. THQ went defunct in 2013, as mentioned before, but in 2014, 1 year after Hero Pants was released, the THQ trademark was acquired by a studio known as Nordic Games. A few years went by with no developments until 2018, when it was announced that THQ Nordic and Nickelodeon would be partnering up to bring the licensed games back for newer generation consoles. And they did just that on January 23rd, 2020. SpongeBob SquarePants: A Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, a built-from-the-ground-up remake of the most popular game in the franchise. This was released for every major console, PCs, and even iOS and Android phones, which means I technically am covering a mobile game on this list.
I'm a poor, shallow excuse for a person, and I'm very sorry for allowing this to happen. And my actions have been irredeemable, and I don't know how I'll ever be able to recover from this, so you don't have to accept my apology, but know that I'm moving on and attempting to change.
The game is fundamentally the same as the original Battle for Bikini Bottom. The game controls nearly identically, and although the graphics are exponentially better, the same charm of the original is kept intact. There are a few differences, however, but mainly just bug fixes. No more cruise boosting, no more damage boosting, no more super speed, none of that. Instead, you can just skip straight to the end of the game.
Yeah, when this game released initially, there was just a bug that would let you skip to the end of the game in like 5 minutes. Somebody better call Shift. Obviously, this bug has been patched now, but on the version 1.0 of the game, you can just skip straight to the final boss, that being RoboSponge.
Every positive thing about the original BFBB applies to this game too. It's genuinely a great time. The graphical upgrade personally makes the game rank higher for me, but they're pretty equal in quality, putting aside the obvious visual difference between the two. The game is just good at its core.
Now this isn't just a remake. They did actually add some original content in the game, that being the multiplayer exclusive mode.
It's a fully fleshed out multiplayer mode that stars you and another player facing Robo-Squidward. This boss was actually conceptualized for the original game back before the game even started development. In fact, a majority of the previously unused content from the original Battle for Bikini Bottom makes a return in this mode, albeit not in the original format, Stuff like the scrapped Patrick's Dream level, the scrapped Robo Spoog phase with the inflatable strong arms, and the aforementioned scrapped Robo Squidward boss. Unfortunately, this multiplayer mode isn't really anything to celebrate. It's a wave-based beat-em-up that lasts for around 45 minutes. It's super slow and honestly wouldn't be terrible if the first 30 minutes weren't boring as hell. The last 15 minutes were super chaotic and genuinely challenging though. I had a lot of fun with that.
Thank you to my cousin Quinn for allowing his soul to be sacrificed for the sake of this recording.
I don't got this, I don't got this, I don't got this.
Combining the original and the remake, this was probably the best experience SpongeBob has to offer. Heavy Iron Studios laid out the foundation for the original game so THQ Nordic could run, and I messed up that analogy, but you get what I'm trying to say. THQ Nordic proved that they can handle the SpongeBob series, and their next game proved that even further.
SpongeBob SquarePants and the Cosmic Shake is the first original game in the series since 2015. Coming out in 2023 for all consoles, PCs, iOS, and Android.
I don't deserve to be forgiven for my sins today, but please know that I'm sorry.
The Cosmic Shake takes place sometime after the events of Battle for Bikini Bottom. Also, side tangent, every single rendition of Bikini Bottom has just completely different in each game. Every 2 months, this town changes. The executives over at the Bikini Bottom Construction Company really have a remodeling fixation, don't they? To start off the game, SpongeBob and Patrick take a trip to Glove World, where they meet a suspicious merchant named Madame Cassandra. She offers to sell the boys magic bubble soap, which they immediately can't resist and start blowing to their heart's content.
Not like that!
After blowing enough bubbles to fill a large stadium, they learn that the bubble soap belongs to King Neptune himself and must be used sparingly or else weird will happen. Spoiler alert, weird shit did happen. The bubbles pop and open rifts to alternate dimensions, which SpongeBob and his new companion Balloon Patrick must traverse to rescue their friends and bring order to the world once again. This concept is honestly really good, and it's executed very well. Each level takes place in a different reality, whether that be the Wild West, prehistorics, or even just set in an action movie set. The jelly scattered around the map and levels is cosmic jelly, which is being used to shift the fabric of reality. The totally not evil Madame Cassandra requests that you bring her as much of that jelly as possible for her totally not evil needs, and Splort, Blort, and Padingle agree. You can see where this is going.
Thanks for bringing back my tooth. It still fits.
Each location sports different costumes worn by SpongeBob and all reflect the level themes. Like the Western level sporting a cowboy outfit, the prehistoric level sporting the classic SpongeGar fit along with Patar as well, and the Fairy Tale level rocking a jester's uniform. Going back to SpongeGar for a second, this game leans heavy into the references. There's a lot of nods to old memes originating from the Bob Show, like the chicken idol animation, the pizza box that you use to glide, and
My leg! My leg!
the level designs themselves are reminiscent of the movie game, if anything. They're all linear levels that heavily encourage exploration and have plenty of jelly monsters to fight. Each level has a themed boss fight as well, each one being an alternate reality variant of one of SpongeBob's gang, like Pearl being the prehistoric boss, and Sandy being the action movie boss, and Gary being the boss for Rock Bottom. All this leads up to the final main level, Glove World, where Glovey Glove is the boss and holds Patrick hostage. After defeating Glovey, you're sent back to Bikini Bottom, where King Neptune finally arrives to put an end to the shenaniganery, but it's too late. Madame Cassandra uses her newly acquired power from the jelly that you, the player, provided for her, and captures King Neptune and Squidward, who is transformed into Jelly Squidward. This final boss is pretty cool and honestly has some hints of what could have been the Robo Squidward fight from the original Battle for Bikini Bottom. It's very well executed. Now that we're at this point in the game, my only real complaint with the game is that it's a bit on the shorter side.
I beat this game in a single sitting in around 5.5 hours. Yeah, I know, no life virgin, but the game left me wanting more, which is very hard to do with a SpongeBob game, yet here we are. I want more of this.
There's a good amount of post-game content too, mainly just involving more cosmetics with a lot more references, but aside from that, the game is done.
Back-to-back bangers from THQ Nordic. That's really rare to see for a licensed game nowadays, and they've pretty much cemented themselves as the face of SpongeBob now for the gaming scene. And I would normally say that's the end of the series, but 2 random games managed to slip through the cracks in 2024.
I can explain.
In February 2023, Roblox game studio GameFam partnered up with Paramount and Viacom, the copyright owners for SpongeBob, to create officially licensed games on the platform for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Oh yeah, and SpongeBob too, but that doesn't really matter as much. It would take almost a year for this game to see a full release, but in February 2024, SpongeBob Simulator released.
Now, hell, I don't even play Roblox, really. The only time I've hopped on recently was to play on a friend's stream, and so just revisit old games like Murder Mystery 2 and Natural Disaster Survival. I wonder what my avatar looks like.
Maybe I played this more than I thought. Regardless, let's go ahead and start it up. I doubt it'll be that bad. Oh my god! It's so bright! This game functions like traditional Roblox grind slop. If you know what I'm talking about, go outside. You click on the clams scattered around the map, and each one gives you a little buddy that you collect. These buddies are characters from the show and range in power depending on the rarity of them. There are common, rare, legendary, mythical, and even rainbow variants of each kind of buddy. After a few areas, your buddies can take battle with one of Plankton's guardian robots, and upon defeating him, you unlock a robot clams that you can open for a chance to get even more rare buddies named goobers. Genuinely, the whole point of the game is just to collect all of the buddies and get as much money as possible. The issue with this game is that it's nearly impossible to get all the buddies without using real money. The game isn't slow by any means, but paying for any of the upgrades from the shop significantly speeds up the pace of the game. I bought the 2 extra buddies just to see if there was any difference, but with the higher level buddies that you get, the difference is very noticeable, especially when the power level gets up to the septillions. Aside from the clams, there are several buddy upgrade stations around the map that can be used to obtain golden figures, as well as rainbow figures and even more goobers. You can unlock morphs of the SpongeBob characters as well that replace your show. You can also unlock morphs of the characters that replace your avatar, which is honestly pretty cool, regardless of how awful Spleetboard looks.
I was fully going into this expecting me to just play it for like 30 minutes and forget about it, but I played it for 2.5 hours. It's not really good nor bad. It's just one of those games that you just turn your brain off and aimlessly grind for like an hour and a half. Now, it does not compare at all to my favorite game on the whole platform.
Yellow Spongeberry's Prison, in quotations, obby.
I've dreamed for times like this. We're finally at the end game. One more game, number 25. Come on, let's bring it home. Let's bring it home!
Patrick Star Game is the most recent game to come out in the SpongeBob series, being developed by PHL Collective and was released only a few months ago in October 2024, for all platforms once again. If it wasn't painfully obvious, this is the first game in the series that doesn't have SpongeBob as the main playable character. Instead, Patrick takes the starring role.
Yeah, you know what? I think this joke warrants this.
Unfortunately, this game isn't very much the right home about. It's a very sloppily put together Goat Simulator ripoff that plays nearly identical as such. You run around and find characters in the open world map to complete various quests for them, as well as a bunch of other smaller quests along the way. Each one of these quests rewards you with a certain amount of sand dollars that all accumulate towards the end goal of the game. Win the gold medal in the Fried Cook games, which is for some reason locked behind a 1,000 sand dollar entry fee. The quests you complete for the other characters range from racing around set locations, destroying boxes on platforms suspended in the air, and fetch quests that send you on a scavenger hunt across the entirety of a set location. The physics engine in this game is honestly pretty good though, I have to say. It's very responsive and adds a good amount of stupidity to the overall boring missions. It's pretty glitchy too, which we love to see in a sandbox game like this. The gameplay itself is fun at times, but it's really just a nothing game with pretty much a little to no story.
Not to mention that the game is nowhere near worth its price. I paid full price for it when it came out. 40 bones, 40 schmeckles, 40 doubloons even, and I beat the main story in 3 hours. Not worth it. And with that, I'm finally done.
That isn't the end, however. On Halloween 2024, THQ Nordic dropped a Halloween trailer showcasing the spookier elements of Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, Cosmic Shake, in the brand new game, which as of right now is still unnamed, but slated to release in 2025. It's good to see that these games aren't being made as a blatant cash grab anymore and have actual care put into them. I'd assume this game is coming out in October 2025, but don't quote me on that. As of recording this video, this is the last update we've gotten for this game, and the final game in the SpongeBob series.
You know, talking about SpongeBob and his little fishy friends for an hour has really made me thirsty. I mean, my throat is killing me. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm under the water. How am I breathing?
He's finally awake.
How long have I been in here?
About 4 days.
And you guys didn't think to wake me up?
Nope.
That just makes me even more worried. I mean, like, how did I even get here? I'm still fully clothed. Please tell me you didn't shower naked with me.
Nah, we still showered. Hell, at least you're awake now.
I have so many questions, dude.
Well, you guys want to watch car crash videos?
Hell yeah.
Well, at least that's finally over with. We should probably go ahead and get up out of it.